know how to start.
Go to slideshow on the top there.
And over to the left.
And then left from beginning.
There we go. All right. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Awesome. So this is Mark Rabel and I, and we are the co-founders of Gamer Camp. It's an annual games festival that happens here in Toronto. It happens every November. We're not game developers, so for us it's interesting, or at least for me, it's interesting to go to GDC because I want to know what's on the minds of game developers. I want to see what trends are coming up because I've always wanted to be around people who make video games, and GDC is like this petri dish where you get to see all these things going in action. I get to see what happens over the next year. So looking over the titles of things that are happening at GDC, this is what I encounter. My avatar, quantified self meets behavioral change games, behavioral economics and social games, are social games legitimate, we don't need no stinking badges, how to reinvent reality without gamification. Now, I love games. I understand how games can be powerful, and that sense of accomplishment that you can get from beating a game does change us. But these sessions that I went to had a very odd tone to them, which I want to talk a little bit more about. So the first one I went to was behavioral economics. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but it's basically what influences us to make certain decisions. And so during that talk, I was really excited because I thought maybe it'd be about how a game can make us do better things or dream bigger things. Actually, it was a whole session on how to trick people to give more money in your game. So they talked about the idea of anchoring. Anchoring is when you seed a number into a person's mind and it influences their later decisions, even if it's not within the same context. So I can tell you something like, oh, there's 40 different kinds of cuisine to be found in Toronto. And then later I might say, oh, I'm thinking of buying a gift for Leslie. Let's all chip in. What price range should we do? 15, 35, 55. Now the way it works is that because you've heard 40 already, you're going to go and choose the price range that's closest to 40. So see how it's kind of like a little magic trick? But where does that fit into a game? Why would you sit there and go, oh, I really hope that I can trick you by giving you a number ahead of time. That way later on you might give me more money for virtual crap. So I was a little bit confused by going to that session. Then I went to the social games panel, and there the guy from Zynga said, without any irony, that Zynga is Pixar. They're also George Lucas, and they're all of modern art. So I'm assuming this might be their shtick. Maybe they're just trying to have a lot of bravado so that they can kind of deflect some of their stuff. But that was, again, odd to me, that this was kind of the sentiment that was going on in this field. There was a guy from a company that I'd maybe describe as an indie Zynga, smaller, and pretty much whatever question people asked. Oh, what are the ethical ramifications of social games? How do you justify, how do you make sure that people are guided the right way? He kept going back to the fact that he could give a virtual cupcake to his mom, and that somehow that was an important gesture. Literally, so people might be mentally ill and addicted to your games, but I can give a cupcake to my mommy. It was just really, really odd. So I guess, okay, so the trend for 2011 is how we become cynical. Sorry, there we go, there's a cupcake on it. So I guess, yeah, that was kind of the thing that I came out of when I started going to GDC. I was like, how have we become a cynical culture? Are the games that we're making no longer of that kind of I'm a child of the 80s, so I remember going to games and feeling so excited and joyous, and this seemed very cynical. And why do I say that? It kind of came from this quote that Satoru Iwata said during his keynote. He said, engineering isn't as important as imagination. And that bodes well. I mean, that's why I love that games now are more open and more people can make games. I want to see games from different perspectives. I want to see them from people who would never know how to program something. What are their lives, how would their choices change the kinds of games that we play? Instead, I fear that by focusing on things like virtual currency and anchoring, we're asking if the games are just not enough. Instead of just having a solid game, are we now trying to put in all these little hooks so that we can try to squeeze more money out of people? If your game is good enough, why would you need to put in a hook to make them buy some dress that's going to expire in 3 hours? That was literally one of the examples. Oh, urgency. Make sure this dress expires within 3 hours, that way people have to buy it. And it asked me, are we making them into virtual hoarders? I actually didn't come up with this. Ryan, did you come up with the virtual hoarders thing? I'll give you the credit anyways, because you beat down Jane McGonigal and I'll give you credit for things. Like, are we making people into virtual hoarders, where they have all of this virtual crap that I'm not sure if they really know if they need it or not. And again, it made me think, wow, that's a bit cynical. And what's sad about that is in games, I mean, everyone who's in it could be in a different field, right? If you have that programming skill, that art skill, you don't have to be in games. What's special about games is the sense of play. The fact that when someone plays your game, they're brought to somewhere different, they maybe get some escapism for a couple of hours. Why would you put this back on them? It just seems like a weird juxtaposition. So I started to wonder why. Why is this happening? And I was like, is it because we see the quick success of companies like Zynga or Rovio? You know, maybe people coming in are like, wow, look how quickly Zynga kind of blew up. Look how Angry Birds is all over the place. Maybe, you know, instead of having to work on something over a long time, I'm not saying that they're the sources of the cynicism, but maybe that's changing how people feel, and they're starting to wonder how they can get a quicker buck. But then at GDC, they had these great retrospectives. So you heard from Yu Suzuki, you know, Virtua Fighter, and a lot of amazing Sega games. You heard from Eric Chahe of Another World. And when you hear the amount of time that they spent on the games and the dedication and how much they really cared for the product that they gave out, it just made that current cynicism seem more real and more stark. And I also wonder if part of it is the fact that we're racing to the bottom in terms of the pricing. You know, like I look at this cup of coffee is $3, and that's the price of 3 iOS games. That's insane to me. I don't know how we're going to be able to support programmers like Yu Suzuki or Eric Chahe based on 99-cent games. How many of those games you have to churn out to be able to have something like this happen? And maybe that's also causing a sense of cynicism, that we need to, you know, work with smaller budgets or create smaller games because we don't have, you know, the audience. We're setting up an audience who now thinks that it's okay to pay 99 cents for a great, for a great game. That's a new word I'm going to invent now, great, when it's really great. And so during that social games panel, Ian Bogos had mentioned that he kind of compared Zynga and social games to high fructose corn syrup. And that's the stuff that is in everything, but it's cheap, and it tastes good momentarily, and it's super sweet, so companies don't have to use very much of it, but it's hell on your body. Like, it just does terrible things to you. And it made me wonder if we could expand that metaphor a little bit more. Are we starting to get into a junk food game culture, where the games that we are, not we, you know what, that are out there, might be momentarily satisfying for the game players, but doesn't encourage healthy behavior. It doesn't get them more interested in games out there. It doesn't get them excited about game culture and the people who make games. Because I think that's what's most important. Kind of like food culture. You hear chefs, you know, and you want to learn about them. There's organic food. There's all these different things that happen in food that perpetuate healthy food habits. Are we doing the same thing in games? So, I am a fan of Mortal Kombat, but I'm really tired of this culture of remakes and booth babes and behavior modification. Look at her, like how the hell do you fight like that? Now, I don't know, like, this is mostly guys, can the women, like, can you walk in heels like that even, let alone fight? And she's gonna stab herself in the boot, like she really is, and I just don't think that's the right thing. More seriously, I wonder, are we excluding more people from game culture because we can't let go of our 13-year-old kind of ideals? Yeah, it's a hot chick in a skin-tight bikini, and she's gonna kick some ass. That's cool. Now are we going to balance that with other things that let in other people? Because the times are changing. You've got, Nintendo, Satoru Iwata also talked a lot about how they've been growing the audience with the DS and the Wii, and they hope to do that with the 3DS. The iOS devices have more people playing games that we wouldn't have thought playing games. I see my mom playing Dance Central, and she's sitting there spending hours learning how to do this one move, and then she leaves the Kinect and practices in front of the mirror. I love that, because my mom would have never thought that gaming was something she would have done. So I wonder, I look at this and I'm like, okay, are we, people have daughters, people have sisters. This is fun in itself, but are we going to let this be the greater context for our gaming culture? So the 3 things that I kind of thought of that maybe we could change this is, first of all, maybe the media, games media needs to change. I don't know if any of you actually heard the talk at Gamer Camp by Matthew Kumar. but he does this amazing talk about how games media and games journalism should change. And I wonder if the same way that there's a food journalism that will call out supersizing or call out high fructose corn syrup, maybe there's some things that games media needs to do. We need to call out anchoring. We need to call out putting pixelated dresses on sale because we're trying to squeeze an extra $1 or $2 out of some 40-year-old housewife in Iowa. I really don't think that that's what we want to think of as a legacy for games. I think that innovation is so key. You know, when you look at the Wii, or you look at the iOS devices, or Kinect, we're bringing in more people into games than ever before. And having that innovation is what's going to continue to get more people to come in and to test out the games. And finally, diversity. Because when we have lots and lots of different people with lots of different ideas, we get better games out of that. You know, I think that that's been the great thing about games, is that there was an Eastern influence and there was a Western influence. And so I think that with greater diversity, we're going to also see the games change. The best part is we have this all in Toronto. We've got an amazing indie media in Toronto that's working really hard for this. You know, people are doing great stuff. Jim is working on a 3D game, which I think is so cool because it means that people who've never maybe encountered a game before will see something like that and say, I'm going to try that, and that gets them going. And then we have one of the most diverse cities in the world with lots of different thoughts. So it's really great to see a large crowd like this because it means that there's lots of ideas, there's lots of people chatting, there's going to be lots of great games that come out that aren't cynical. Because we can create the game culture that we want to live in. Thank you.